Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor John V. Kofis is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
Hello everyone, welcome to an introductory session, a teaser video on the issue of popular and institutional opposition to authoritarian neoliberalism in America, with a special focus on the current administration of Donald Trump. The fact is that throughout history, regimes that have been populist right wing, from mildly authoritarian, let's say, to extreme forms of authoritarianism, fascism, and Nazism in the interwar period, have succeeded not so much because they were inherently strong, either in terms of having a solid power base. Power base includes, by the way, the police, the military, and an institutional power base, which includes, of course, the elites in society, first and foremost, the business elites, and then the church and so forth, academia, etc., think tanks in our contemporary period and so forth. So the weakness of the opposition, the fragmentation of the opposition, as many journalists and scholars have pointed out, in our contemporary era during the Trump administration, especially in the second term, which is only a couple of months, by the way, the fragmentation and weakness of that is really more important, more significant than the strength of the otherwise chaotic authoritarian regime, such as it is the oligarchic style regime, as Senator Sanders, Bernie Sanders from Vermont, as well as others on the progressive side of the Democratic Party have labeled it. Now, I do want to point out something that is rather, I think, significant insofar as there is a lot more popular opposition to the Trump administration, a lot more grassroots opposition to the Trump administration, but it is not receiving coverage from the mainstream democratic/liberal media, which is only interested in pursuing opposition within the framework of the pro-Wall Street neoliberal agenda and pro-militarist agenda that they were following both during the Obama era, the Obama presidency, as well as the Biden presidency. There is a lot more popular grassroots opposition. Again, I stress, it is simply that it is not being covered. And this is an issue that I'm going to talk about in the longer video, which of course I invite you to take a look at. Now, as far as the rest of the popular opposition, it is covered only because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman from New York, along with the senior senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, who is an independent caucus with the Democrats, and he is a progressive, that is a New Deal Democrat, not a socialist, a New Deal Democrat, a Keynesian, in other words. Those people, those two, have been attracting crowds of tens of thousands, no matter where they go. And this is indicative that there is indeed a groundswell opposition. There is a lot of popular opposition to everything as public opinions are pointing out, by the way, from the state of the economy, which the majority of the American people, according to public opinion polls, no matter what poll you look at, doesn't matter. Right now, according to public opinion polls, there is popular opposition to Trump's economic policies, especially given that the so-called tariff myth of using tariff revenue to replace the outrageous claim, which any economist worth his or her degree knows is nonsense, to replace the stream of revenue to the IRS from direct and indirect taxes, from income taxes and sales tax and so forth, is nonsense, considering that historically, for the last 70 years, roughly 2%, actually a bit under 2% of such revenue comes from tariffs. You can't possibly, how are you going to replace the rest of the 98%? In any case, nonsense aside, the economy is not doing well. Interestingly enough, neither is Wall Street, by the way. When you look at Wall Street, where it was when Trump was elected in November, where it is now, not a good story at all, by the way. And in fact, institutional investors who are actually publicly, at least, I don't know what they're saying, but privately, but publicly at least, they claim to be pro-Musk, pro-Trump. But much of the trail of the investment shows that money is flowing out of the United States, out of Wall Street, into other markets, including America's main rival, the Chinese markets, of course. I do want to say a couple of more things because this is just an introductory so-called teaser video. The Democrats, unfortunately, the mainstream establishment Democrats, have no credibility, and they are not the opposition to the Trump administration. The fact is, the reason Trump is doing as marvelously as he is not because there is Wall Street and Silicon Valley and the military-industrial complex are behind. That's not the reason. The reason is because there is no opposition from the other major party, namely the Democratic Party. The opposition of that party comes only insofar as members in the Senate and the House of that particular party, the Democratic Party, who have a history of supporting neoliberal goals, just as does Trump, who have a history of supporting militarism, to some degree, far more enthusiastic insofar as supporting military adventurism, regime change operations, supporting the war in Ukraine instead of seeking a diplomatic solution to the crisis, supporting what the International Criminal Court has deemed to be a war of genocide by Israel against the people of Gaza. Unfortunately, these are the Democrats. One of the reasons, as Senator Sanders pointed out, that the working class, which should have been behind Kamala Harris, the vice president who ran against Trump, but it was not. They stayed home. As the independent filmmaker Michael Moore, who did some research on this, and I guess he's preparing a documentary film, the popular base of the Democratic Party abandoned to a large degree the Democratic Party. The reason? It has moved to the right. When they attack the Trump administration, it is interesting that they attack the Trump administration not from the progressive Keynesian or New Deal position, as does Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and a few others. They attack it from the right. So, for example, they attack the Trump administration for seeking peace by being pro-Russian. Of course, it's no secret, and anti-Ukrainian. In other words, the implication is the war should go on. The forever the war doctrine is one the Democrats espouse, but the forever war doctrine caused enormous economic instability on a world scale and inflationary pressures inside the United States, for which the working class paid the price, and then they stayed home when they came to elections. So what kind of opposition is that? Then when it came to voting on the continuing resolution of the budget, Chuck Schumer, the minority leader of the Senate, the leading Democrat in the Senate, voted with the GOP. He and a few others, I believe it was 9 of them altogether. So they voted to legitimize what Trump has been doing. So there is no political opposition within the establishment Democratic Party. So where do you go to find political opposition in America today to the Trump administration's authoritarian neoliberal policies and what Bernie Sanders, AOC, and others call oligarchic society and authoritarian style regime? Where do you go for that? Well, clearly there are not many places that one could go within the two-party system, because both parties support the same goals. They differ on culture wars. Culture wars is what separates them. Identity politics is at the core of this. So the facade of identity politics conceals the class warfare that both are engaged in. Now, in the longer video, I point out that Trump is, in fact, a manifestation of the third worldism. Third world, of course, is what we call the global South today. The third worldism slide of American society, as the country is losing ground very rapidly to China. Considering that the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, is now saying, it's predicting that the US will struggle to achieve 2% GDP in 2025, Trump's first year in office. China, 5%. Yet you have Wall Street analysts and pro-Trump and even Democrats, anti-Trump people saying, well, we're doing better than China. So China's 5% GDP growth is bad, but barely reaching 2% is, as the IMF is arguing for the US, that's good. Now, the other thing is the lies and the myths and the contradictions in the policies. In a recent debate on the Senate floor, Senator Whitehouse really exposed some of the myths with regard to the $4.5 trillion tax cuts and tax breaks, corporate subsidies that the Trump administration wants to give back to the richest 5% of Americans. While on the one hand, the Trump people are claiming economic nationalism and jobs for America, they're actually paying, they're subsidizing some of the largest companies in America, okay, from pharma to high tech, to offshore, not to China, but to offshore. And another, as we'll see in the longer video, another contradiction is that they are permitting, and unfortunately, Democrats have no credibility because they have gone along with this and they're responsible for it. They are permitting companies, including some of the most profitable pharmaceutical companies, giant corporations, I'm not going to name them, but on the floor, Senator Wyden and Senator Whitehouse pointed out that what you have is these companies are declaring profits they have made in the US as offshore profits, so they don't pay taxes. So we have massive tax evasion, and yet the Trump administration and Musk are claiming that they're cutting federal workers, and anti-labor, anti-working class class warfare attack here, blatant, that gives the signal to the private sector, go ahead. It's open season on the working class. They are the problem, not the neoliberal policies which have gotten the U.S. into the problems that it has in the last 50 years since Reagan. Okay, the last started out the foundations laid during the Carter administration. Reagan institutionalized neoliberalism. So these are the contradictions, and there are a few voices within the Senate, within the House, that actually bring this up on the floor in debates and also in within committee settings. Okay, I invite you to take a look at the longer video, the analytical, because I developed the theory of Bonapartism, namely, it's named after Napoleon III, the nephew of Emperor Napoleon, right after the French Revolution, who, of course, stylized this new type of regime of dictatorship. And what type of democracy does America have? And what kind of a position does America have right now? I invite you to ask questions, write comments, and please join this channel. It is managed by my very good friend Asad Alim, and I thank you for listening.